This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
But Bill Maher, his podcast, when he launched Club Random, he only wanted to do video. And I had to convince his team to do audio as well. I said, just strip the audio out and make it available. And they're like, fine, we'll do that, but we're not going to promote the audio. So they only promoted video. They only told people about videos. 10 months later, after that show had been out, it was getting between 12 and 15 times more audio downloads than they were getting video downloads and views. Because the content was what he was saying and his guests were saying. And it's very similar to Jonathan Frakes and Brent Spinner's podcast, that you really don't need to watch that podcast to enjoy it. You can listen to it and get 99% of the value and do it while you're driving your van, doing it while you're working out, walking the dog, doing yard work, laundry, running away from your wife, whatever it is that you're doing. You can be doing it while you're just something else, right? It's multitasking. And that's the beauty of audio podcasts. And while I'm not anti-video, I do tell people you have to have audio. Audio is so important. And because there's just more time in the day to consume audio.
Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibone, known to my friends as Marv, and this time I'm speaking with Rob Walch about many things. Rob has worked in podcasting before it even was called podcasting. 2004, I believe, Rob, was when you first started doing work in podcasting?
The fall of 2004. And there was no Apple Podcasts. There was no iTunes of support for podcasts. It was, if you wanted to listen to a podcast, you had to go out and get lucky and find the RSS feed and manually add it to an aggregator app like iPod or X or Juice, something like that. Yeah, it was a different world than we live in today.
Was it ever, like you said, there was no Apple podcast app, as in iTunes as we remember it from back then. But saying that, then very soon after that, we were starting to listen to them on the old iPods that we had, the iPod Classic. I had the 60 gig model, I think it was. So
I had the original one with the movable click wheel, the original first gen.
Yes. So, yeah, you had one of those click wheels as well. They were brilliant.
I still have it. Still works, believe it or not. New battery, but it still works.
I've still got mine in storage. I might have to pull it out and see if I can get it working. Just for a bit of nostalgia. But how the world has changed. I mean, so to give away to people, pull the curtain away, we're recording on the 17th of February. So going from there being no such thing as iTunes, which would become Apple Podcast, today Apple have announced, and it's become available, that you can watch video podcasts on Apple for the first time.
Well, it's HLS video is what's going to be the first time. So HLS, you've always been able to watch video podcasts on Apple Podcasts. So Apple Podcast has supported video since it was iTunes. So back in 2005, when it launched in iTunes, there was video podcast. It was Rocket Boom, Tiki Bar TV, Ask a Ninja, Hot for Words. So there were podcasts back in the early days, video podcasts. But now it's HLS video, which means it's more open to being where you can do dynamic ads and streaming. It's more of a streaming option rather than the full download, which gives you a little bit more options. But yes, Apple just announced that, and by the time the next major update of iOS comes out in the next 2 months or so, that will be available to everyone from the consumption point of view, and then multiple podcast hosts will support that as well.
Well, that is good news because, I mean, there's something about, I know I was speaking with Sam Sethi, and when we were having a chat, we were both talking about the whole download versus streaming numbers in a sense. And we were both saying how, in a way, download numbers is old hat in a way, because most of us consume by streaming now, as opposed to, like we were saying before we started recording with the iPod Classic back in the day, we'd download them to those devices. So it almost harkens back to that. So what's your opinion on the metric side of things with the download versus streaming?
Well, first, in podcasting, a lot of people need to realize that Apple Podcast is still where the majority of downloads and where the majority of consumption happens. And in podcast world, a download is either a stream or a progressive stream, I should say, or, which is what most people do, or a full download. So when you see downloads in metrics, it is really a combination of the full download plus the progressive stream, the progressive download, which people think of as streaming. So if you go to Apple Podcasts and you hit play, or you don't have it set up to automatically download, which is a default setting, and you hit play, it's doing a progressive downloading. It's downloading byte ranges as it comes through. That said, if you do have it set up for downloads, Apple Podcast has always, and iTunes has always stopped downloading if you've gone 5 episodes and 15 days combined, 5 episodes and 15 days combined without playing an episode from that podcast. And given that Apple is number one, and most podcast hosting companies, when you look at where the downloads come from, it's just somewhere around 45 to 55%, a little bit higher, some at 60%. Apple Podcasts, Spotify number 2, typically around 20%, 15 to 20%. So when you look at that, yes, there are a lot of podcasts that get downloaded, but those are usually from people that are actually consuming those podcasts, because once they've stopped consuming them, the downloads actually stop. And you can see still for the biggest podcasts, there is a big spike on the first day of release, and those are not progressives. Those are the true downloads. So the bigger podcasts, at least, we do see that the true download, the full download, is where the majority of their audience is coming from. And we know that from tracking with advertisers on the bigger shows, the ROI is there. So it is a valid metric, download. It's not the greatest name in the world, but we spent 4 months on the IAB arguing over what we should call it. And at the end of the day, the download was the least worst name for it. So long way to go with, I don't mind I don't mind the term download. It's better than all the alternatives.
Yeah, the lesser of all those evils, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. It's like democracy. It's not the greatest form of government, or it's not a perfect form of government, but it's better than all the others.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of interesting looking at podcasting now, 21 years. This year it will be 21 years since the actual phrase was first used. And it's interesting to look at the evolution of podcasting and how it started and how it's grown over that time.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think it's changed? And do you think the changing face of podcasters is for the better for the listeners? And what do you think are the good things that have changed?
Well, when the name was first initiated, it was because people were talking about transferring a file to your iPod and podcasting, right? That was before Apple even supported it. So the name, I've heard people get out there and say, oh, Apple, Steve Jobs got on stage and invented the name. No, he didn't. It was already in use for 9 months prior to Steve Jobs ever saying the word. So it's not an Apple-centric name, and Apple always said, hey, we take no ownership of the name and you can use it. And Apple has been the biggest steward of the name as far as allowing it to be freely used by everybody and not trying to take claim of that. If you tried to use iPod, like iPod or X, they had an issue with iPod, but podcast, no problem. Early on, what the name meant was you had an RSS feed, you had audio or video content, even PDF content that was available via the RSS feed, and you could sync to it. And my definition of a podcast today is you have an RSS feed and audio, video content, and you're an Apple podcast. And people hate when I add that you're an Apple podcast because Well, Apple Podcast Directory is used by over 400 apps globally and to power those apps. So if you want to get in Overcast, you submit to Apple Podcasts. You want to get in a lot of other apps, you submit to Apple Podcasts. So that to me is what a podcast is. That said, there are a lot of people that are on YouTube only that say they have a podcast. The name podcast for some people has come to mean a long form show that is repeated on a regular or periodic basis, right? Weekly show, daily show, monthly show, some regular cadence to release of content that's more than 30 minutes in length if you're on YouTube, right? You don't hear someone like Mr. Beast doesn't say I'm a podcaster. You don't hear Mark Rober saying he's a podcaster. The people that have the short form content that is all visual, they don't call themselves podcasters. But I have come across many a video folk that have an hour, 2 hour long podcast. Bryce Crawford was one. I considered it a podcast, but he didn't have an RSS feed. Now he does, but he didn't at the time. So I think where the world has gone on this is it could be any long form content, but I still say if you want to be a purist, you want to get technical, and you want me to put my my podcasting hat on and get real anal about this, pardon the phrase, you need an RSS feed and you need to be an Apple Podcast, and it can be audio or it can be video. It doesn't matter what the content is. It can even be a PDF. And there are podcasts in Apple Podcasts that are nothing but PDF content.
So I'm smiling now because I'm actually imagining James Cridland. As soon as you said that just then about the RSS feed, I'm imagining James just going, "Yes, that's what I think," because we've both heard James going on about that.
Well, you need it. I mean, here's the reason why you really should have an RSS feed to be a podcast. If you want to say you're a podcast, it means there's no one gatekeeper controlling your content. If you're just in YouTube, you are at the whims of YouTube's algorithm or strike system. I know a podcaster that got he is a podcaster, and he was on YouTube, but his main property was on YouTube. That was his primary, and it was a podcast, Menace to Sports. And he got 3 strikes on YouTube and got kicked off YouTube. He didn't do anything wrong. It was a sports podcast. He didn't say anything controversial, but someone who didn't like the fact that he was an Ohio State Buckeye fan and used to be an assistant coach at Ohio State. Someone didn't like him, reported him to YouTube, and got him kicked off of YouTube with the strike system. And he had to go and get his video then up on Rumble and then push it on the podcast side. So if you don't have that RSS feed, you don't have a direct relationship with your audience, and you can be wiped away from your audience where they have no idea why your show is gone. And that's why it's so important to have an RSS feed. Even if you're video first, still pull the audio out, upload it to a podcast hosting company, get the RSS feed, at least control that part of things.
Yeah, there's a new podcast that's come out actually with, it's more of a celebrity-based one with Jonathan Frakes and Brent Spiner from Star Trek: The Next Generation. And that one sort of irritates me for the very same reason, really, because it's a video. It's basically a talk show, a chat show as a video format on YouTube, and that's where it is. And it sort of niggles me because I've seen it and I've thought, well, I want to listen to this, but most of my podcast enjoyment is done while I'm at work driving a van around, and so I'm not going to go onto YouTube while I'm trying to drive in traffic. So I'm not going to watch it. But if it was available I know people are going to say, well, why don't you just open up YouTube and play it and have it on in the background to listen to? But those few times when I've had video format versions of podcast on, I've glanced at the screen when they've mentioned something, but I don't want to do that while I'm driving.
I mean, here's what I'll say to folks too, is your biggest audience a lot of times will be the audio audience. Even Joe Rogan, people don't realize this. Joe gets more downloads from the podcast, the audio side, than he does from video. His video on YouTube, if you look, a typical episode's 1.5 to 2 million views on YouTube, which is really good. but his podcast is doing 8-9 million on the audio side. So he's doing much better there. Bill Maher, many people know Bill Maher Club. He has podcast Club Random. He also does Bill Maher HBO. But Bill Maher, his podcast, when he launched Club Random, he only wanted to do video. And I had to convince his team to do audio as well. I said, just strip the audio out and make it available. And they're like, fine, we'll do that, but we're not going to promote the audio. So they only promoted video. They only told people about videos. 10 months later, after that show had been out, it was getting between 12 and 15 times more audio downloads than they were getting video downloads and views, because the content was what he was saying and his guests were saying. And it's very similar to Jonathan Frakes and Brent Spinner's podcast, that you really don't need to watch that podcast to enjoy it. You can listen to it and get 99% of the value, and do it while you're driving your van, doing it while you're working out, walking the dog, doing yard work, laundry, running away from your wife, whatever it is that you're doing. You can be doing it while you're just something else, right? It's multitasking. And that's the beauty of audio podcasts. And while I'm not anti-video, I do tell people you have to have audio. Audio is so important, and because it's just more time in the day to consume audio. And Jonathan Frakes and Brent Spinner, their team is doing them a disservice by not having audio available.
I mean, even though they are celebrities and people know them, I still believe that if they had it in an audio only format, their numbers would enlarge. And also, if they weren't exclusive to YouTube only and went out everywhere, using the RSS feed that's open source, you would then be able to, I think their numbers would go up exponentially.
Yeah. They might get a bigger audience from the audio than they have from the video, especially given that the demographics for their audience, Star Trek fans, tend to be older males above the age of 40. I mean, that's where the biggest, if you're a Brent Spinner, and if you know who he is, if you know who Jonathan Frakes is, chances are you are a male over the age of 40. Right? That's just because of the show, when it came out, how long ago it came out, and everything else. I mean, it's not Starfleet Academy, right, which is new. It's something that came out in the 1980s.
Yeah. But I know most of the Star Trek related shows that I've spoken with and had on here, they've said to me that the majority of their listeners are of that sort of age. No matter what Star Trek show that they're talking about, that will be the majority of their audience. Like you said, of the 40 plus, who have got other things to do with their eyes.
Right. I mean, I could do this. My kids can't. Right. So LLAP, right?
Yep.
And if you know what LLAP is, you're a Star Trek fan. And if you're going, what is that? Not so much. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So their show, who their target audience is, right? It's their fans. It's fans of both of them, which I am. And give me an audio. I don't want the video because I'm too busy. I need it where I can consume it while I'm driving the car, grocery shopping, whatever I'm doing. I'm out and about. I want that audio.
I mean, good hang, with Amy Poehler. They've said that their numbers, the same there with the Joe Rogan, the majority of their numbers come from people who are audio only, and there's a smaller amount or a smaller percentage that is of the video side of it.
Yeah. And there's more competition. A lot of people don't realize, I mean, so many people are getting into podcasting now that think video first, but they don't realize there's so much more competition on the video side, because you're not just competing against other video podcasters. You're competing against all the YouTubers. You're competing against Mr. Beast. You're competing against Mark Roper. You're competing against those folks. You're competing against Netflix and Hulu and HBO and Disney. And worse than that, you're competing against video games. Right? So there's so much things where people, if they have time to watch, can choose something other than that. Live sports. Right? You're gonna win against the World Cup? I don't think so. So, but audio, A lot less competition. Who's your competition? Radio? That's okay. I'll take that for competition.
Yeah. Copy and paste programming on radio.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any things that haven't changed over the years with podcasting that you are glad they have stayed the same?
I think the biggest thing that hasn't changed over the years for podcasting is all of the niche content. People
Yeah.
doing shows not for the masses, but for something they're passionate about. Whether it be chameleon breeding, there's a chameleon breeding podcast, backyard beekeeping, these are content topics that are so niche they would never make it on radio, right? It just doesn't make sense. It's just not economically viable. But if you have 500 people, there's one that was on pneumatic valves, and had 600 listeners per episode for pneumatic valves. And I'm an engineer, and I'm like, that just sounds boring as all get up to me. And yeah, even if you know what they are you really going to listen? But some people, that was important to them. That show was important to them. And to me, having that niche content available in podcasting and having it available everywhere with no gatekeepers, that is what I love about podcasting. And I don't want to see that go. And unfortunately, a lot of times people are looking at video here on YouTube, video here on Spotify, and they're trying to make these walled gardens. And I don't like the walled gardens. You don't, as a content creator, have the greatest control in those in environments. And on top of that, some of those people choose what gets in. And as we talked about earlier with YouTube, you can get kicked out for doing nothing wrong. So that's the beauty of podcasting. I think that's also not changed. Freedom of speech, true freedom of speech, true democracy of audio and even video.
Yep. I mean, shout out, like you said, with the niches there in podcasting. I've said that's one of my favourite things about it is that if there's a subject that you're interested in, 99.9% of the time, you will find a podcast that is out there about whatever it is, no matter what subject you can think of. So, and I will shout out, for instance, Pete, who does the, I don't know whether a lot of people know this, there's a podcast called Get Flushed, and that show is about portable sanitary units.
Nice.
So he talks about all talks with people who, manufacture them, people, distributors, people who clean them and do that for a living, and he works in that industry himself. So, like you said, if you tried to go up to a radio executive and say, "Oh, I've got this idea for a radio show. I want to interview people about sanitary units," there's no way that you would get backing from a commercial radio station.
No, and you can't blame the commercial radio station because they couldn't make any money on it. Right? They have to they're a business. They have to have content that appeals to the semi masses. Right? A radio station that put that on the air would be looking for a new program director very shortly. So you can't blame them on that. And that's where podcasting comes in. Podcasting comes in where it allows the content to be anything. And that's what I love about podcasting. I just started a new one, Space Business 411. It's my new podcast. And I'm just interviewing people at startups in the space business. Am I going to get a huge audience on it? Probably not. But I'm going to have fun with it. I'm going to learn a lot. I'm going to talk to people that started different businesses that have products up in space. And I'm going to be very well educated. To me, I'm doing the podcast so I can learn more about the industry and help my son, who's an aerospace engineering major, find a job. but it's a nice niche podcast, and I love it. And I love the niche content that's out there.
As you know from the notes that I've sent to you and nobody else can see, I've actually got that written on my notes because I had to listen to that last week and I really enjoyed that show a lot.
I had so much fun talking with Sarah, the COO of True Anomaly. And we just went, and I was an engineer. So we just, I'm like, how are you going to manage this like on a supply chain basis? And we geeked a little bit about supply chain. that would be snoozeville probably for most people. But if you have ever worked in a company and you understand lead times and supply chain and how it's been in the space industry where lead times were 12, 18, 24 months. And now all of a sudden the industry's changed to where from when a customer says, this is what I want for a satellite to when it goes up is 8 to 10 months. The world's completely changed there. To me, that was so fascinating. Most people probably won't find it that way, but to me, as an engineer, I had so much fun talking with her, and I have a few other interviews coming up on that show that I'm looking forward to talking with other people similar to her.
So he's almost,
again, that's the beauty of podcasting. You can geek.
You can. So he's the person who would employ Bruce Willis to go out into space and sort out the issue that we had with that film. I forgot the name of the film now that he was in.
It was I can hear the music. I can see Steven Tyler's daughter in the movie.
Don't want to miss the thing, isn't it?
Is it Armageddon? Armageddon?
Yes, I think so. Armageddon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. We've already touched on our open RSS versus exclusivity. I mean, I have issues with that, and you have issues with that as well. And it sort of does go against the original intention, to my mind at least, of it being open to all people.
Now, there are some people that do private RSS, and you got to pay for it behind a walled garden, and that's fine. That's the choice of the content creator to make that available and make that private feed available via, where they can take it into Overcast or they can take it into Apple Podcasts. And there's the Supercast, where we can talk about Supercast just got acquired. Did you see that this week? So Supercast got acquired for their premium, and they do premium. Yeah. So, I'm fine with private podcast feeds and content because people need to be able to, right? Some people want to make money doing this, and they're offering a service. Like I remember one where they were doing a podcast was doing commercial real estate episodes, teaching people about commercial real estate, and they were charging $50 a month for private access to the content. And that might sound a lot to most people, but it was actually a pretty low price when you actually look at what it costs to get into that space and learn about that space. And their subscribers were more than happy to pay that amount. And the person actually told me they undercharged for it. But that's the choice of the content creator, whether to make it public or private. What I don't like is when it's like Google or them are saying, hey, you got to do it this way, and if you want to get the content in, and you don't have any say on it. And that's what I don't like. So I'm very much for the open, even if you do have to pay for it as a listener for certain content. But that's, the majority of content creators aren't going to charge because they can't.
Yeah, one of my favourite moments this week actually was hearing on Pod News Daily, James introducing the episode with the is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Supercast. And James always puts this sort of humour into Pod News Daily that makes me laugh, and Pod News Weekly review as well.
Yeah. And, hey, kudos to the team there, Jason, and the team at Supercast. I'm always happy for a team when they do a successful exit or merger, and it means that their product was viewed as valuable. So, kudos to those guys. I know Jason, so I'm just, Jason, if you're listening, kudos.
Well, it's nice when you've got companies that merge that are two really good companies that makes them offer even more to the podcaster in general. I mean, that sort of links to something else here, which is DJ Scoob, who does Undiscovered Entrepreneur, and Rena, who does Better Call Daddy. She does that show. They both have spoken with me because, I've already spoken with Elsie Escobar before and interviewed Elsie. And when we were talking about yourself and Elsie, between the three of us, they were both saying how all the interactions that they've had with you and Elsie have always been friendly rather than being, they said it wasn't like business. It was like speaking with friends, with both of you at different times. But in the podcasting world, that's what a good podcasting company does, is
Correct.
to have that sort of intimacy between, and that sort of relationship between yourselves and the podcasters. It's different to any other corporation, really.
When I started in the space working, for Libsyn back 18 and 19 years ago, I chose the title VP of Podcaster Relations because I wanted to have relations with the podcasters. I mean, they asked me what did they want me to call the job, and that was what I came up with for the title. And so I was the very first ever podcast VP of Podcast Relations on any company anywhere. But to me, it was why I picked that title was I didn't want it to be biz dev. I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be about a relationship that I was building with the other content creators because I was one. And I'm very, very happy that I get to continue now with Captivate and now with Elsie, again at Captivate. And I'm back as VP of Podcast Relations at Captivate. And that's what I love doing. I love talking to podcasters. I've been on calls for the last week plus with a lot of podcasters and just talking. I'm not trying to sell. I personally moved my podcast over to Captivate before I started there back in December. And I just started here on February 17th. So it wasn't about I'm podcasting at Captivate because I was hired by Captivate. I was hired by Captivate because I was podcasting at Captivate is the way I looked at it. And that was because I knew the tools and I know, the podcasters I talked with today, I had a big one and they're like, hey, come back to me in a couple months when you have all these tools that are, you guys are rolling out ready and we'll move over. And I'm like, okay. And there's others that, if you're listening now and you want to reach out to me, you can email me, rob.walch@global.com. So rob.walch, W-A-L-C-H, not S-H. Happy to talk with you and set up a call and just see, what's right for you. And then I help people that, that are on competitors all the time that I've known for years. They'll call me up and ask me, hey, my show's not updating in Apple. Can you help me? And even if they weren't with where I was hosting, if I could help them, I would. And I still do that in Apple support forums. I'm the number 2 person on Apple support forums for the podcasting section behind. And if you've never interviewed him, you should. Roger Willamette. Roger Willamette is in the UK and he has helped more people in podcasting than anyone else. Nobody knows who Roger is. Roger has helped more people with their podcasts than anyone, period. And this guy, it's unbelievable how quick he responds on the Apple support forums. And he's at level 10. There's a handful of people that are level 10 supports. And how that works is you have to get if you answer somebody's question, you're helpful, you get 5 points. And if you really answered it and they think you did a good job, you can get 10, right? So if you're helpful, 5, if you really answered it, 10. And he's got 60,000 points, which is an insane amount of questions that he's answered. And I am a level 4 and I'm number 2 and he's level 10 and it gets exponentially harder to move up level. So anyway, if people don't know who Roger is, you want to know someone who's helped podcasters. That's, to me, Roger's the guy I bow down to and someone I have a lot of respect for.
Wow. What a guy. Thank you, Roger. So in podcasting, what do you think are the mistakes that people should avoid?
The biggest mistake is the title of their show, getting cutesy with the title. Cheese Doodle podcast when it has nothing to do with cheese doodles, right? Oh, well, video games. I'm going to call it the Cheese Doodle podcast because I eat cheese doodles while I play video games. I'm like, yeah, but people don't search for that. You have to really think about your title, about what people are going to search by, because that's your one opportunity to be discovered in Apple and Spotify is your title. And what I always say to folks is come up with 3-4 good titles, then go into Google Trends and see which one of those people are actually searching for on your topic. And I'll say to folks when I'll do an audit on them, I'll be like, okay, give me, sometimes I'll be like, they want me to do an audit. So I'll say to the first thing, I'll say, hey, can you give me the name? What should I search for to find some of your competitors' podcasts? I want to see what your competitors are doing. So they'll give me some words to search for, none of which are in the title of their own podcast. But they know what to search for, but they don't have it in their own title. So I would just say to anyone listening, think about that. What's 3 or 4 words you would search for to find a competitor's podcast? And how many of them, those words, were in your title? And by the way, was any of them the first word in your title? Because the first word in your title is really important. Predictive search results really skew for that first word. So that's the biggest mistake, bad titling. And I'll say this, you can change the title of your podcast at any time. So if your title is not optimal, change it. You can always still refer to it at the end of your title and even in your show. Update your title to make it appropriate for what your audience is looking for. When I started, my biggest podcast was Today in iPhone, which became Today in iPhone, iPod, iPod Touch, and eventually became Today in iOS. I changed the title as I went along because, well, originally it was just the iPhone. Then Apple added the iPod and the iPod Touch, iPad and iPod Touch. And then Steve Jobs is on stage and he goes, and now we're going to call it iOS. By the time that presentation was over, I had already registered Today in iOS and .com and I had changed the title. So, think about what your audience really is looking for and change your title.
I mean, the title of your show, your new show that you've come up with, Space Business 411, is a perfect example of that because it says exactly what it is. It's about the business of space, or being in the business of providing things for going into outer space. And then 411 at the end is a shorthand for saying all you need to know, in a sense. It's the 411. So Space Business 411, you can't get it wrong. You know exactly what it is.
And I was going to go with Space Economy 411 because that's what I consider it is the title. But then I looked in Google Trends and everybody was searching for space business, not space economy. And it was a huge gap. I mean, there was like 10 times more search results or search queries for space business than space economy. And I'm like, okay, that's what the audience was looking for. That's what I'm going to call it. I would have, if it ever down the line, if I ever go to Google Trends and it's switched to space economy, I'll switch the title. I'm not married to the title. But that's why I picked what I picked. I eat my dog food. I take my own advice, even though I don't like the title. Is not what I picked originally. I went in with 4 or 5 titles, and after looking at Google Trends, Space Business was the clear winner. It wasn't even questionable. It was like I had to search a couple times just to make sure I was not wrong, because I was like, is it really that big a difference? I'm like, yeah, it is. So yeah, use Google Trends because, again, while people may be going to AI, there's still a lot of people that are using Google search. They haven't all gone over to Grok and ChatGPT yet. Still, the majority of people are still searching the old way.
Yeah. Although saying that, I mean, AI is trained through doing searches through search engines anyway, and that's how it finds its information anyhow.
Yeah.
But I mean, another perfect example of a perfectly named or titled show is the Captivate show, In and Out of Podcasting, because it is the in and out of what's happening in the podcasting world. And that's a really good title as well. And also, I'm happy that that's making a comeback now with yourself and Elsie as well.
Yes, we're looking forward to getting the first episode up where I'm working with Elsie. We got to get a schedule worked out and we'll start recording new episodes on that. So excited to be back podcasting again with my co-host, Elsie Escobar, after doing it 12 years. And yeah, look for that episode, new episodes to roll out shortly. Don't have a launch date yet, but it should be soon. We just have to pick the right day of the week to record. I think we're going to do Wednesdays.
Record on a Wednesday, then release what weekend?
or maybe Friday. Maybe Friday. We're going to see. I'm going to see what works out for Elsie. So yes, I'm looking forward to getting back and doing episodes again. I missed working with her and recording with her. It was a, the way the feed was closed down was not done well. It was a very good example of how not to end a show. And that was not any Elsie's fault or my fault. We had no say in the matter. But yeah, it was definitely done poorly.
Well, Friday works nicely then in that case, because if you think about it, you've got Pod News Weekly Review comes out on a Friday. You've got the Sounds Profitable. They bring out their weekly review episode on a Friday as well. And in a way, that means, for me personally, as someone who loves the world of podcasting, that's my Friday sorted then. My Friday will be catch up on what's going on in the world of podcasting.
We'll probably still be where we record Friday and release on Tuesday. We kind of release on Tuesdays because there's less holidays on Tuesdays. So we've always picked Tuesday release as it's an easier day because you hit less holidays throughout the year. You have more people that are commuting to work on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday than any other days of the week. So we always picked that. That was the reason we picked Tuesday mornings for the release. And we've never claimed to be the breaking news show. Right? That's James's forte, and he does a great job at it. Right. So we're not trying to do that. We're trying to give a little bit more in-depth analysis and sometimes very different opinions on things. Me and Elsie do not always agree, which is perfect. You don't want a show with two. If you have two hosts that agree, co-hosts, well, you don't need two co-hosts. You can have one. Right. So you have to have different opinions. And so we try to dig in and get a little more analysis, but I don't think we're ever, there are literally news stories that we would have in our show notes, and we've tried to record for a certain period of time. And at the end of the show notes, they don't make it. So they get pushed to the next show and to the next show. And I remember one time there was a news article that just kept getting pushed, and it was like 10 months from when we originally put it in. It never made it on the show. I'm like, maybe we should kill this one off now.
Yeah, we do that with a music show that I co-host called Toppermost of the Poppermost, where we're going through the charts from 60 years ago. So we'll come out between us, the three of us, we'll come out with these facts about artists or artists that we're talking about. And because we've gone on for a long time on things, and we think, oh, well, we're almost to time constraints, this, that, and the other, we bump that subject and we go, well, we'll bring that up next time that we talk about this artist instead. And it keeps happening every time. We're like, oh, we will get to them eventually. And yeah, it's the world of podcasting.
Yeah, but there are some news items that we talk about are evergreen, right? Like it'll be something, advice on how to do something in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And those, we never felt bad about bumping those. Matter of fact, we choose to bump those when we can. But that was the other thing on the podcast. We were always trying to give some sort of inside information, and that's what we'll be able to do with the Captivate one. We get back and giving advice to help indie podcasters technically, growth wise, monetarily, if they're trying to monetize. We're trying to hit those three things. Like, how do you help a podcaster save time? How do you help them grow their audience? How do you help them make money? Those are the three things that I think were the core of when we looked at items to talk about on the show. Does it touch one of these three?
Yeah. Going back to one of those two people that I was talking with, Scoob from Undiscovered Entrepreneur said to ask you about, his word was, how do you leverage AI?
So I do use AI in the space business one, right? 411. I used the AI for a couple things. One, to find potential guests, companies that I wanted to talk to. So I would be like, okay, for the first group of shows, I was like, give me 20 startups in the space industry that are doing manufacturing in the US, but not in California. Because I wanted to find, because everybody focuses on California. So I wanted to find something outside of California. I felt they would be more inclined and more open to talking with a brand new show. So that gave me a hit of 20 shows. And then when I got through that, and then I got to the different guests, and I said, okay, give me a summary of what this company has done in the last 5 years and what have they done in the last year, right? Give me some updates on that, looking through news and what people have talked about. So that saved me research, right? Before I would have had to gone through and search, read all these articles. This gave me a summary. Then the items that I found, then I dug in deeper on my own. So it was kind of my assistant to say, here's some of the bullet points that you should be looking for. And then when I saw the bullet point that I liked, I went, okay, good. Then I even said, give me 10 questions that I could ask who the guest was going to be. Give me 10 questions I could ask her about her past and the current company. And it gave me some questions, and half of them I did not like. But half were good. I changed them around, but they gave me ideas on what to ask. So I used AI basically as an assistant that I would have said to, a personal assistant, go out and do this for me. Find this information, do the busy work. Get me that basic information. So that's where I see AI helping podcasters, not to do the content, but to help you in preparing that content, doing the busy work so that you can cut through the garbage, the BS, and get to the important pieces, find out what they are, and then you do the digging on the important pieces. So that's where I used AI. I know people that are using AI to create all the content, everything, scripting it, everything. And you can tell. So I don't recommend that. Again, I think it should be your assistant. It shouldn't be your writer. It shouldn't be your producer. You need to use your gray matter, separate yourself.
Yeah, because otherwise you might end up with mistakes like the one that James Cridland discovered for that show about Sydney, Australia. If you remember that, where he was listening to it and suddenly they started talking about, the AI voice started talking about Sydney Sweeney instead of Sydney, Australia.
I've seen AI generated artwork where they spelled the title of the podcast wrong.
Yeah.
And the word was like plugged, and they misspelled plugged. I'm like, okay. Yeah.
How you launch a show, do you think, has that changed? And has the means of growing a show also changed over the years?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed from the perspective of when you launch a show a long time ago, there weren't a lot of shows in the Apple directory that you had to get around. So now how it's changed really does make the title of your show so much more important. And that's why I talked about title earlier, because while there's 3 million podcasts in Apple Podcasts and only 450,000 of them have released something in the last 90 days, there's still 2.5 million in that directory that are dead, but doesn't matter. They're still causing search results. So you're getting lost in that field of 3 million podcasts, even if they're not active, even if the majority aren't active. You're not breaking through unless you really have the specific title that people are looking for. So again, launching it, title is really important. Social media, you have to use it. LinkedIn, to me, and Facebook, of all the social media, where I got the most hits. Twitter, very little. Was surprised. Very little uptick on the launch of the new show that came via Twitter, but Facebook and LinkedIn clearly were the two bigger ones for the launch of this new show that caused traffic to be driven. And then it's cross promote, finding other people that are in a similar podcast, getting on your promo or on their show. Having your promo played on another space podcast would really help me. That's my next step, where I'm going to go start promoting that. And then remembering that you don't just do one push. You release the show, you got to do multiple pushes on social media and to get that out there. So I think you have to put aside a certain amount of time on marketing when you launch a new show, and be consistent, and be repetitive and do that through the first 5-10 episodes, where you just every few days you're reminding people on different social media platforms that, hey, I've got this new show, and hoping that one person that's got a good listenership or good following picks it up and promotes it to their folks. Make sure if you have guests that you send them all the links.
Yes. Yep. So the change now to working with Captivate, but then also the Space Business 411. What work you're doing now? I know it's only your first day at Captivate, but what do you see going ahead?
Well, at Captivate, big part of it is going to be talking with the podcasters, helping them if they want to monetize, work with them, the new tools that are being rolled out at Captivate and Dax to help them monetize. So there's some really good things. So make sure you listen to the Captivate podcast. We'll be talking about that in more detail when that comes out. But that's going to be one big part is me helping bring in content for the monetization. The other is just I still am looking at, always have been looking at bringing in content to host that just wants to get started and that has no intention of monetizing. So that is still what I love about Captivate. It's not like, oh, you have to monetize. They still want the niche content that just wants to get out there and get the word out. So it's not all about monetization. Again, helping you grow your show, helping you monetize. Those are the two things, and it can be either one. And there was a podcaster that just emailed me this weekend, said, "Hey, I want to move over. I liked working with you when you're at Libsyn. I want to move over to Captivate." And I was like, "Okay, let's get you moved over." And the person, not a big show, has no intention of ever monetizing. He just wants to get his content out there, and that if that is you, again, reach out to me, rob.walch@global.com, and I can help you.
Okay. What shows do you like to listen to yourself?
The one I listen to without a doubt on a most regular basis outside of history podcasts is All In Podcast with Jason Calacanis and Chamath and David. I've listened to that since it started back in 2020, 2021. I've known Jason since 2005. So a big fan of what he's done. And I like that podcast because you get nice competitive opinions. Politically, they're on different sides, the folks, but from a business point of view, they really understand the world of media and the tech world. So they have, these are guys that were at PayPal, at Facebook when it started, at Google when it started. Right? These are people, and Jason was at Weblog Inc. These are people that were at the beginning of tech and media, and especially tech media. So they have an insight that most others don't. So I really like that from what you learn from them. On the history side, Hardcore History, favorite, and Revolutions with Mike Duncan. Still love the podcasts. But yeah, those are some of my ones that I listen to on the most regular basis.
Okay. Is there anywhere else that people can contact you if they need to?
You can also personal email rob@podcast411.com, and happy to talk with you.
All right. Thank you for speaking with me today, Rob. This was great chatting with you. Thank you very much. You can find pods like us on any streaming platform, and if you just go to themarvzone.org, the opening page on there has all of the links to find the show and to get in touch with me. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.